Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. So, I went on to just kind of slap a picture of me, kind of old one, um, of just Doc Samson on this thumbnail. Just because Doc Samson is a very easy cosplay to do. All you need is a red shirt and long enough hair that is to be light enough to eventually go through Photoshops and edit and whatever. A lot of the early Photoshops um, on a lot of these kind of older photos. So yeah, did some experimenting and try to see what worked, and so still looked good enough. So I just kind of plopped that out there. So now I've gotten that out of the way, because Doc Samson is actually a Hulk universe character. You can probably see him in cartoons like the Hulk cartoon, or you can also have seen him in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. He's in there. But anyways, uh, so I will go on to say that I have read and I have a number of She-Hulk comic books. Most of the time, it's most of like the number ones, where right around the time that the new Hawkeye comic book came out, I grabbed the She-Hulk number one from I think like Marvel Now, like that time period, and read it, and I was like, okay, this isn't like what I thought it would be. But I also I think have the original number one She-Hulk comic book also, and I also have I think another She-Hulk Wolverine uh, comic book where they went up against the Wendigo, and by the end of that comic book, they ended up getting like Nick Fury involved. So like I am familiar with the character. I know the back history of the character, and then when we get into this show, it honestly makes me just want to say here that I think we should have gone on and focused on putting together a really good Hulk movie instead of a She-Hulk show. Because obviously, with this show, this first pilot focuses more on Banner than it does on Jennifer. To where by the end of the episode, when they go on and play that song, Who's That Girl? I'm like, yeah, I don't know anything about anyone. Like, I still don't really know anything much about Jennifer, the title character. I don't know much about any of her friends, who any of these people are. Um, like, besides Banner here, I know nothing about no one, to the point to where by the end of this episode they end up having a villain character, which I know who the name of that character is, and I will talk about that when we get into spoilers. But that character is to be so quickly like gone in into like what? By the end of this episode that I'm like, wow, okay, like this is pretty lame. Um Often there's a lot of times within this pilot episode that it becomes against like female Hulk versus male Hulk, and so it's a gender battle between the two of them, and I honestly thought that that was really garbage. I didn't like that at all. um Plus, when really looking at it, we have to have whoever the newest latest character is has to always have to go on and be better than the prior. uh but hence why eventually you can go on and have World Breaker Hulk, uh, or World Breaker She Hulk at some point, when they have nothing better to do for this show. Uh, so I would honestly feel that there is obviously, painfully obvious, a reason why they're probably going to need a bunch of just guest stars to be plopped into the show rather than giving us a really good She Hulk show. Because I think the focus is just going to be like, hey, like, let's really try and sell this character by just having guest stars, because we obviously, like, people are losing interest. And so we got to figure out a way to just plop characters into the show to give people a reason to watch. And that's freaking sad, but it's the truth. So for this pilot episode, I feel like there's some potential for me to like this show, but like the pilot episode doesn't give me anything to give a about. And so that's how I just feel. I feel like right now, right out of the gate, this pilot episode is bad, but I'll watch more of it in the coming weeks because I know that there's maybe better things ahead. Maybe story-wise. Maybe for me to get interested or excited about, possibly via not this first episode. So I'm hopeful about this show, but we'll see how really hopeful I'll actually be by the end of the road of this. I think honestly, if we go on and we do have yet another Hulk movie, I think we're just going to have an Amadeus Cho Hulk movie. We're never really going to go on and have another, like, standalone Bruce Banner movie, because we've already done that twice already. And so if they're going to give us another Hulk, it's probably going to be another, like, different Hulk character. So I will actually be, like, excited for that, though, if that happens. Because I've been waiting for the longest time for another Hulk movie, another Hulk installment. And it also seems that they are re-bringing back certain characters from the Incredible Hulk movie to be plopped back into the show, even though it seems that a number of these characters all look vastly different than who they were originally. Still, I guess, you just have to justify that, like, well, hey, but we're going to make this more comic book accurate, or our version instead of the Incredible Hulk version, for those characters who may never have gone on and seen the previous Hulk films. So, even though in the What If series we kind of go through and kind of retcon things for simple mistakes that were made in the past. So with that said, in this pilot episode, we get to know a lot of stuff about Bruce Banner, the guy who's not the title character. We get to find out where he's possibly been since Ragnarok, and we have some characters that are referenced here that I probably will have to go on and explain at some point who they actually are. And so, also, I'm going to have to go on and explain who the villainous character by the end of this episode was, if she even has a life to live past this pilot episode, which she probably won't, but I have nothing better to do than describe who this character was, because there isn't enough stuff going on in this episode. So hopefully I can go on and quickly wrap all this up in a briefer amount of time than the actual length of this episode. So let's try and go on and do that, shall we? So, this episode is just, like, really to just be like, hey, wait till next week. Binge watch both the two episodes when you actually have a decent amount of content to siphon through, and so you don't have to watch this show right away. You can wait a week till there might be a better episode coming out. So, without a doubt, I think it's about that time to just go into that double five. Or let's... I've kind of teed this show up as best as I can to try to be as vague as I can, because there's not going to be much for me to say in spoilers. So yeah, let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time to spoil this episode. So, in the beginning of this episode, we have Jennifer going on and talking about a person using their powers, and that this person had gone on and used their powers ill-advised, and so on and so forth, yada yada. It's a lot of superpower mumbo-jumbo to get us interested about the show immediately, to then have this mostly be Jennifer's closing statement for her appearance in court. So, Nikki is to immediately say that Jennifer, once doing that speech, is to immediately have won the case. And we, of course, have an associate of hers called Dennis, who is critiquing her, saying, like, well, I think I should go on, and I think I should have gone on and done that closing statement because I think I would have been better at it. And Nikki is like, well, if you would have gone on and done that, I would have killed you, and Jennifer here would have been my lawyer, and we would have beaten you, or we would have beaten whatever this case was, and so on and so forth. So right away, there's kind of weird tones going on with this show. I'm hoping that this show is not going to turn into Batwoman, because that's how I kind of feel that it may at some point feel that it's going in that direction, and I'm very concerned. So because if it goes in that direction, I'm like, well, like this is going to be a character probably after whatever this is will probably be quickly forgotten about, and then let's go on into a Hulk movie that comes somewhere down the road. I would love to hope, because that's what's going to happen. So this character is going to get quickly forgotten about, as well as a number of characters that were all already in their own Disney Plus show that got re-put into the MCU, and they're like, oh, hey, yeah, like, I remember something about that WandaVision show, but, like, all I needed to know was the last episode of it, to find out where she's going to be in the MCU. So, that's kind of almost every show for the Disney Plus, even the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, which is great, but you could just have watched the last episode and, just, like, and get the gist of what happens. Probably like this show will be. Anyways, so Jennifer goes on and is to turn to the camera and break the fourth wall here, and she is to go in and mention that, hey, like, you guys don't want to hear all this boring lawyer crap. You just want to go on and find out about how I became She-Hulk, because, like, we already start the show with her already being She-Hulk, because we have Nikki who's telling Jennifer, it's like, well, hey, if nothing else works, you can just Hulk out and surprise everybody and win your case that way. And Jennifer is like, no. So we transition to having Jennifer and Bruce Banner just in a car together. What a massive transition that is. So Bruce is talking to Jennifer, and he is now to be normal Bruce Banner. He is not to be Professor Hulk, or as they say in this episode, Smart Hulk, which I'm like, wow, like, we already gave this character, like, an actual name from Endgame, and, like, is Disney Plus just kind of like, well, like, that's great and all, but we don't like that name, so we're going to call him Smart Hulk. And I'm just like, really? What a crappy thing to do! Like, we've already had a name for this guy since Endgame, but you're gonna go on and just like, like, we're bitter about that, and plus people didn't like, Professor Hulk anyway, so we're just gonna call him Smart Hulk. So Bruce is going on and telling us that he has this gadget upon his wrist that can now keep him as Banner. And so Bruce is to go on and explain where he's been, I guess, since possibly Ragnarok. And Jennifer is like, wow, like, that is an extremely long story of which that you've told me everything about your life since X amount of time. And so Jennifer is kind of complaining about the length of the story, and Bruce is just like, well, So all of a sudden they're driving along, and a ship ends up coming to arrive here and forces both Jennifer and Bruce to drive off the road and get into a car accident. Supposedly Bruce Banner is to go on and say that that is a Sicarian ship, which if you guys don't know what the Sicarians are, eventually you have probably never seen Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor Ragnarok, because we go on and we have the Sicarians that, of course, were with Jeff Goldblum's character that had overthrown uh, the Grandmaster in Thor Ragnarok. And so now that the Sicarians are to have taken over the like Sakaar, I guess they're going to go on and try to reobtain Hulk so he can go back to Sakaar, and maybe they're going to start the World War Hulk storyline or Planet Hulk storyline or whatever that will eventually be at some point. To maybe add in Amadeus Cho, which would be great. Because that's probably going to be the next Hulk movie. It probably is. So, or maybe Hulk will have a son, because that might be a thing. For Hulk to finally have a son, for some goofy reason. So, and plus also, Star-Lord was to go on and call those Sicarians Ninja Turtles, like the guys that looked very like insect-like and whatever. With, of course, the one guy who is to tell Star-Lord, it's like, Star who? Like, the guys that are around him were to be the Sicarians. And so, like, we've kind of seen a variety of different variations of these things over time through the MCU. So, Bruce and Jennifer. So, Jennifer is to realize that she is to have these opened wounds and she's bleeding, and all of a sudden Bruce, through this car accident, is to have lost his gadget because, man, did I guess Bruce just create a very flimsy gadget to put on his wrist, which is stupid. But Bruce is to immediately go on and say that he's going to go through the change of becoming Hulk, and that Jennifer should try to run from him because it's not safe and Bruce is bleeding. And come to find out, that is how we go on. And instead of through the comic books, where at one point Bruce is to have to perform a blood transfusion to save Jennifer's life because their blood is compatible, instead they just go on and quickly create this car accident, having, I guess, Bruce's blood mixed with Jennifer's somehow, and then all of a sudden we see via car reflection Jennifer changing into her own She-Hulk. And all of a sudden we then see Jennifer, who is to make her way to this bar, where all of a sudden she's to go into this bathroom to try to clean herself up, and there is a number of women within this bar who look unusually dressed, but I guess that's what it is. And so they're going on and taking care of Jennifer, tossing on clothes for her to wear. And so this bar, of course, was to be called the Ideal Sports Bar for whatever goofy reason. So Jennifer walks out of this bar and is to be catcalled by a number of men. And so eventually Jennifer, who is to get irritated by these men kind of walking after her, Jennifer ends up turning into She-Hulk to scare all these men off. And so the next thing we end up seeing is She-Hulk waking up in Bruce Banner's beach hideaway, or beach cave of sorts. So Jennifer is to wake up realizing that there is a Def Leppard shirt, or maybe it's a Led Zeppelin. I always get those bands confused for some goofy reason. And so Jennifer goes on to eventually find now Smart Hulk doing some experiments, and so Come to find out, Smart Hulk is to realize that he can go on and heal his arm from being in a sling from Avengers Endgame because of Jennifer's body and how it is drastically different than Bruce's. So, Bruce is to explain that this home that they are now living in is something that both Banner and Tony were to work together on and build. And at some point, Tony told Bruce that this home was actually just some loan, and that maybe at some point Tony will take it away from him one day. You would honestly think, with Tony now being dead, that there may be a point where whoever the next person who owns this environment may come back and justifyingly collect this. Maybe like an Ironheart, because she may go on and be the next character that they put into a show and whatever. Or it may go on and very well be the older version of Tony Stark's daughter that I'm sure they're going to have to age up to just justify that there has been some time that has passed since Endgame. And either that or Pepper can do a cameo here and just be like, yeah, like this place, like, I don't know if we can keep going on and funding this place. So that would be just kind of a funny little thing to just kind of have here. I don't know how everything's going to get rolled out. So Bruce is to mention that his arm is now fine, so that way both Smart Hulk and She-Hulk can have these competitions of who is the better Hulk, because there has to be something that has to go on here. So Smart Hulk is to mention all of the times of which that he was to put notes within this thing as far as he would use it as research. Now he's going to have to use it as a syllabus to help out She-Hulk learn that she's going to need to go on and control her anger, and that she's going to have to take years to be able to channel this other side of her. And Jennifer's like, I don't have years. Like, I want to go back to my lawyer job because I have a number of student loans that I'm buried under that I have to pay off. And Bruce is telling Jennifer, it's like, well, no, like, you, like, every time that you may go out there and you may get angry or upset enough, like, you could unleash this character out in the world, and like it could be like catastrophic to go on and do something like that. Like, she could kill people and so on and so forth. So Bruce is to go on and teach Jennifer things of meditation, to try to get her to go on and be able to figure out how she can change from Jennifer to She-Hulk. And come to find out, Banner is taking every single bit of paper of research to tear it out, because it seems that Jennifer is to be vastly different than Bruce ever was. So years of learning that Banner / Hulk has had to go on and do. Instead, She-Hulk is to have basically quickly ran through all of that and become what is to already be a Smart Hulk version of herself. To basically have both Jennifer and She-Hulk becoming one and the same. And Banner is now going to be like, oh my god, like, you've already, like, jumped so many years ahead of where I was. in a very brief amount of time, because Hulk had to go on and put Jennifer in this chamber to then put her life on the line. And so Jennifer has this helmet on, she quickly takes it off, and Hulk is telling Jennifer to put the helmet back on for research purposes. And so Jennifer's like, "You're gonna kill me?" Like, what else do you use this chamber for? So Jennifer turns into the She-Hulk and is to become very upset to the point of her ripping off this door and getting out of this chamber, realizing that she could be killed here, and she's very upset. And so Hulk is to go on and be like, "Hey, that's $1 million worth of money that you just wasted there." And so, come to find out, Jennifer and She-Hulk are one and the same. And so She-Hulk is talking as Jennifer was, and Bruce is like, "What? Like, so, like, you don't have another guy that you're going to wrestle with for a number of years?" And Jennifer's like, "No, I guess not." And so Bruce is just like, "Ah." So I honestly think because all of the stuff that Bruce had experimented on had basically fast-tracked anyone else who's going to become a Hulk in the future to basically be already like smart Hulk, where every single one of them are all going to be able to keep their other side of them in check because of the experimenting and process that Hulk had went through to eventually share his blood with another person, and that'll share that same run of things that Hulk had to go through. So that's why Jennifer is the way she is, that she has basically bypassed every single thing that Banner has already done. So now we just have them going on and tossing big boulders, and we get to the point where Jennifer is to go on and immediately want to leave and go back to her life because she knows that she's just basically doing everything way better than Hulk has ever done. And Bruce is trying to tell Jennifer that she needs to stay here so that way she can learn from a person that has had experience in the life that she is now going to lead. And she could learn a thing or two from Banner. And so Hulk is to just get so annoyed with Jennifer that he ends up doing the Hulk clap, the Hulk like smash, and come to find out when She-Hulk is to see Hulk doing this, she then goes on and tries to mimic that same movement because he of course is She-Hulk of course is very upset with the fact that this guy was to do this, and like she is going to try to learn how to do it. And so when she starts to do the Hulk smash, she realizes that she doesn't do it well enough, and Bruce is like, "Ha ha ha, like you can't figure it out so easily." So all of a sudden She-Hulk is to realize, well, like, no, I'm gonna figure this out. So She-Hulk goes on and is to, again, slap her hands together, and then she realizes that it does technically work, but not as well as Bruce had. So eventually, She-Hulk goes on and claps multiple times, and is to kind of push Banner back. And so we start to realize that, one way or another, that She-Hulk is just overall, like, in her own way, just better than Banner. And at some point they are to wrestle and fight one another, and we have She-Hulk and Banner who fight and kind of slingshot this one tree to smack all these coconuts onto Banner. And so Bruce is to also tell She-Hulk there isn't always just downsides to being a Hulk, there's also an upside. that they can get possibly as drunk as they'd like and keep the buzz, but not go on and deal with all the other things about being drunk. And so both of them are going on and sharing a beer together, or basically sharing alcohol together. And so She-Hulk is to go on and ask, or yeah, She-Hulk is to go on and ask about Captain America, on if Captain America was to ever go on and sleep with any woman, because he would have had to have gotten laid at some point. And we of course have Banner that's like, come on, like, this is an old friend of mine, like, let's just kind of leave it be. But we of course have an end credit scene where we come to find out that yes, Steve at one point did lose his virginity in the USO tour, and so come to find out that might tell us somewhere down the road that Steve did have kids anyways, if not with Peggy Carter, because that would be the rational thing to go on and do. Instead, like, there might be another Captain America kid out there somewhere. That wouldn't that be great if it was actually the kid called the Patriot or something else? Would be kind of interesting to play with that. Because technically there are other alternate variations of Captain America out there that hopefully will be less goofy than some others. Let's get Werewolf Cap. Let's get that. Werewolf Captain America. That sounds great. So, let's bring Chris Evans back to be Captain America, just so that way they can turn him into a werewolf, and he'll be a CGI'd character the whole entire time. It'll be great. As well as them, how many times that they've already mentioned Tony Stark in this episode. It seems so tempting to bring that character back, right? Even though he has no interest in coming back, because he's obviously stated in certain interviews, he's like, there's no more I can do. They could probably cameo him. They can bring him back in this, like, kind of quick character and then do away with him, which, yes, like, a lot of people will not like that at all, but when really looking at it, there's probably going to be something that is needing to go on and sell Ironheart to you, and that may very well be it. To just have Robert Downey Jr. just do cameos every once in a while, just pop up on certain things, but not actually be like a main rolled character that they can place. But everybody's also wanting Chris Evans to immediately just come back as Captain America, and I think he has no interest in doing that either, because he can go on and do several other projects right now. But so, there is so much other things that I'd rather talk about than this actual show, because there's nothing going on. So while She-Hulk and Hulk are fighting, we have them go on and destroy Bruce's bar. And so Bruce goes on to have to need himself and She-Hulk to repair this bar. So Hulk is to finally realize that She-Hulk is a much better Hulk than he ever was. So he's going to go on and say, like, well, hey, if you ever want to leave, like, go on and rightfully so do so. Because, yeah, like, it makes all the sense in the world for you to want to go on and leave here. Because, like, you're, like, way better at this. So, and like, this girl only needed a number of days to, like, figure out how to work everything, so to speak, as far as being a Hulk is concerned. So Jennifer leaves and goes back to her lawyer job. And so we also had the moment when Hulk was to wake She-Hulk by using that air horn, and she goes from being Jennifer to She-Hulk. And we had Hulk that was mentioned a number of times that he had changed from Bruce to Hulk was when he would be knocked unconscious. So we really have to go on and play with every time that Banner could become a Hulk is when his subconscious mind is to play around with that. But we've had times where Jennifer was to go on and supposedly meditate with Hulk, where she is to mention there had been a number of times where she has had catcalls or had a number of things done to her, and she has really figured out a way to control her anger for the longest time, anyways. And how is this going to be any different? And during that whole conversation, we have Jennifer who turns into She-Hulk briefly, and then changes right back to Jennifer. And again, Bruce is to be like, wow, like, this is different. Because we have to go on and say that multiple times within this episode. So, Jennifer goes back to being a lawyer, and so she ends up going on to need to now do her closing statement. And all of a sudden, we have Titania, who shows up in this courtroom to try to go on and take people down and hurt them and whatever. So, who is Titania? Titania is to actually be a wrestler that was to eventually get in to be mixed up with this group called the Grapplers. And so Titania is to go on and to eventually be as strong as Ben Grimm's character, The Thing. But it seems that in some stories she is to go on and do heavy amounts of weightlifting to even possibly be stronger than Ben Grimm himself, to possibly not be able to narrow down exactly how strong Titania really is. So, because I had to go on and kind of research this character anyways, because I'm not heavily all-knowing of every She-Hulk villain or Hulk villain, or knowing anything about the Grapplers, because if we go on and we have like a number of like other kind of Hulk villains being plopped into the show, that would be great, but we'll see how that goes. I'm assuming they're going to be working Titania and She-Hulk for a while. We'll see within the show, because we have so many other things going on. We have so many guest appearances through so many other characters that are probably going to be the main focus on the show. So She-Hulk realizes that Titania is now here, so Jennifer changes into being a She-Hulk as Nikki is to grab this girl's shoes. And Jennifer turns into She-Hulk, does one like punch move, and takes out Titania, knocks her out, and then is to change back from She-Hulk to Jennifer, and she is to adjust her clothes and say, "Excuse me, Judge, can I go on and do my closing statement now?" And that's when we end up playing the song of Who's That Girl, and then the show ends, and then the end credits scene is something that I've already said, so I'm going to try to get out of here, because the length of now this review is the length of this episode, so I apologize, but otherwise, that was bound to happen anyways, so I'm just going to quickly get out here. I honestly had to watch this episode twice, because I didn't really pay attention to it the first time around, so when watching it the second time around, I really still, like, I was like, who cares about the show? Who cares about it? It's just like knowing little Easter eggs and little things, but realizing that I knew that this pilot episode was not going to be that spectacular right out of the gate. And then also my biggest complaint was the runtime, that this is only 38 minutes worth of an episode. I'm like, dude, this is 38 minutes? What a waste. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.